So you want to get into the super deformed action figure business. What is the super deformed action figure business? Well, you're looking at it. Funko tends to be the king of it, in America at least. And a big part of that is because of the selection of characters and the joy that this brings to fans. But they're not the only player in the super deformed market. There's a lot of companies and a lot of different scales. And it's a form that tends to attract a lot of new licensors, because if you could come up with a super deformed form factor, well, you're printing your own money, because if you can create a form factor that you can literally paint on with very little additional tooling, where the same basic concept can be many, many different characters, well, that is a great position to be in from a manufacturing standpoint. And it's one of the reasons that super deformed figures tend to be a less costly option, because there's very minimal deco, there's very minimal sculpting. Usually the same bodies are shared. Some characters need fully new sculpts, others just need new heads. But most of the detail work is done through deco. Now, when we talk about this as a super deformed category, that's what the toy industry calls it, sort of like they call action figures doinky doink play or dolls hair play. Super deformed is because the characters have a feature exaggerated. Now, it's a concept that comes from Japan. As an island nation, Japan has sort of created its own culture, and as part of that, it has its own toy culture, which has evolved a little bit differently from toy culture in the US and even Europe. So the super deformed vinyl trend that started in Japan in the 70s and 80s, usually with enlarged heads, enlarged eyes, and a smaller body and limb. In fact, they even have a character called Super Deformed, who has a comic book series. Hey, cute, right? So that's where it comes from. It comes from Japanese culture, and it's been translated into American pop culture by multiple companies. Now, while form factors and the super deformed category is absolutely on the grow, it is something where you have to be very conscious of different factors, such as whether or not the line is all-inclusive or not, or whether it actually embraces fans or is just spitting things out mindlessly in a form factor that no one has created an emotional attachment to. And then finally, it has to be looked at as a low-priced option compared to more expensive action figures. So scale, character design, specific look can vary, and different companies have taken different approaches to the super deformed category. Usually it involves an elongated or larger head with smaller limbs, but that's not always the same. And sometimes even action features have evolved into this form factor, although not with much success. You may recall the Mighty Mugs that Hasbro put out. This is actually their 2.0 Mighty Mug, where you would press down on the head and it would cause the internal mechanism to spin, showing 3 different eyes or facial features. Usually, so much comes through in the eyes, like with Spidey here. So this was a way of Hasbro bringing back Mighty Mugs to continue to compete against Funko, but that's not where Mighty Mugs started. Years ago, they looked like this, which I think was actually the superior product, but that's not important right now. Mighty Mugs started off, again, just as a very generic shape that with minimal tooling, sometimes Iron Man's helmet or Thor's helmet needed, wings. But for the most part, it was a form factor that required very few additional parts and was just deco. It was a way of collecting a favorite character at another scale. And if a company can own a scale and a form factor that they can produce almost any IP under, like I said, you're printing your own money at that point, because you can take the same basic Iron Man shape and turn it into Indiana Jones.